We're at Pholia Farm in the kitchen above the dairy barn. We're going to make yogurt today. I'm going to make some goat milk yogurt. I made cow milk yogurt yesterday. I made some yogurt sour cream yesterday that I'll tell you about. We'll talk about plant milk yogurt, how to make that, and a few iterations of that. My book, Homemade Yogurt and Kefir, will be out May 12th. There are links in the description below, as well as links to my other books where you can buy them, and our farm, and all the usual social media. So I hope that you'll follow or subscribe if you like any of this. My cheese making books are here, and I will tell you how to make yogurt cheeses today using yogurt cultures. So first, let's just talk about yogurt. It's been around a long time. It may be one of the oldest made, created, produced foods used by humans other than beer and bread. It is a fermented food, and that's why it's so good for us. When you're shopping for yogurt, if you buy yogurt for your family, luckily it's very popular. So you will see so many different brands and lots of marketing names and ideas and twists to get you to try their product. Many of these are indeed the same as the other, like Australian style is basically the same as Greek style. Greek yogurt, and I am part Greek, but the term Greek yogurt was decided as a good marketing. What this type of yogurt is called in the Middle East is labna. It is simply drained yogurt, and that's what I grew up eating. We made our own yogurt from our cow, Buttercup. Her milk, and my family drained it. It's just what we did. We didn't even call it Greek yogurt. But you're going to find many different names, so don't let that confuse you too much. As with any product, your best bet is to look at the label. For good yogurts, if you're going to buy them, and you might be buying them just to use it as a starter culture for your yogurt, but look for very few ingredients. Should just be milk, maybe some skim milk powder, which they might just call skim milk, and that's being used as a thickener for the yogurt and those cultures. If you start seeing lots of other ingredients, then you know other things have been used to thicken it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not going to be as close to the original. However, we are all used to thick yogurt, and if you're not going to drain your yogurt, you either have to get used to it being a little thinner, or you have to add those other thickeners. And I'll tell you why some yogurts or some milk is going to make thicker yogurt than not. So let's talk about these cultures. Here I'm adding powdered culture to the milk. And typically I'm going to use powdered culture either from Cultures for Health or from getculture.com. Both of them have great products. I usually go with getculture.com just because I can get a whole vial with less packaging, and it'll last me a lot longer. But if you're not making yogurt a lot, a company that packages in smaller packets might be a very practical thing for you to choose. All yogurt cultures are not the same. However, they are going to all include two basic types of bacteria. And I'll tell you their names, so you don't have to remember it though. Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus. So those two different families, species of microbes developed together. They work symbiotically to make yogurt. They are in the family of microbes called thermophiles. Thermo as in thermos, which means heat loving. So thermophilic bacteria are going to need a little higher incubation temperatures than like your kefir microbes and buttermilk and most of your cheeses. And I did a video 2 weeks ago and a live broadcast on making kefir. So if you're at all interested in countertop ferments where you don't have to worry about that temperature so much, that's a great direction to go for those probiotics and healthy fermented milks. So these thermophiles like it warm. When I say warm, I mean anywhere between 100 and 125. So you have a range of temperatures in there in which they'll work. Depending on the cross section of microbes in that culture though, Some are going to grow better at the lower range, some at the higher. So you can get a slightly different flavored yogurt and even slightly different thickness depending on where your yogurt actually ferments. So if you're using an Instant Pot to do your fermentation in, or an ice chest, which I'll show you how I do that in here at home, our home, or some sort of a yogurt incubator, they all have slightly different settings, and it's going to depend on the ambient room temperature for most of them. If your house is colder, it may not keep it as warm as it would on a hot day. So just know you're going to have some variation, but it's fine. I am so casual with the way I make yogurt here, and I make it all the time. That you just learn. Some batches are going to be a little thicker, some a little thinner, some a little tartar. You might have forgot it and it fermented a little longer, but it's no big deal. So why do we love probiotics? Probiotics are, first of all, you need to know that that term is defined by the World Health Organization. So these microbes, to be called probiotic, have to have a proven health benefit and survive through your stomach into your gut. That does not mean that some of these other microbes that are in yogurts aren't also beneficial, and they indeed may be probiotic, and it just hasn't been proven yet. In the book, you'll read about some of the conflicting studies on some of them. But I say don't worry about it too much. Just be sure you're choosing a culture that has known probiotics in it. So probiotics, like I told you, they have stress reducers, immune support, and they're going to help ferment that milk. How does that happen? So when you're working with milk, you have real milk now. So when I say milk, usually I mean real dairy milk. It came out of the mammary gland of a mammal. That milk is made up of primarily water, but then also proteins, milk proteins, which are called caseins, whey proteins, sugar, lactose, milk sugar, butterfat, and then a lot of minerals, and vitamins, of course, and some enzymes. So these microbes, they not only love the lactose, the real dairy sugar, but they also curdle that milk by the acid they produce. It acts on the milk proteins to curdle them. So if you want to make a plant milk yogurt, that's not going to happen. It's not going to thicken. So when you buy a plant milk yogurt, you'll look at the back, you'll see a myriad of thickeners. This one has like 10 in it. 10 different things to try to get to that yogurt thickness. It's just one of those compromises if you're going to go 100% vegan, that things aren't going to happen. You're not going to create a product that's identical to the original, but I don't think you should even try. I think you should go for what that benefit of that product was. And in this case, it's easy to turn a plant milk into a probiotic ferment. Relatively easy. So dairy milk, though, is particularly suited for making great dairy ferments. So today, like I said, we're going to use a couple different kinds. I want to show you the difference between, this is just store-bought cow milk, and this is our goat milk. Now, when you use different milks, they're going to naturally come to different thicknesses depending on the amount of protein in them. Texturally, some are going to be creamier because of the amount of butter fat. So you could buy low-fat milk at the store, which I never encourage because it's lacking some of the vitamins that the fat globule contains, and it's not as creamy and delicious, but it's going to still curdle. It could be skim milk and still curdle. You could use powdered milk and still curdle it. It's because the proteins are still there. Goat milk sometimes has a different ratio of caseins to whey proteins. So sometimes it will make a particularly thin yogurt unless you do the heat treat step, which we're going to do today. So when yogurt recipes call for heating the milk, often it says to 180 Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. And in the case of this, I boiled it. What that does is it denatures, that means changes the natural behavior of those whey proteins to where they stick to the caseins. So picture them floating separately, as the heat changes them, they become tacky in essence and stick to the casings. So that when you make your yogurt, you get a thicker texture, a heavier body to it. And those proteins are high protein, they're protein. So it helps increase the protein content, particularly if you're going to drain the yogurt. If you did not do that heat treat step, when you drain the yogurt, you're going to lose those whey proteins in the whey. So it's a good thing to do. For that reason, you can use ultra pasteurized milk to make your yogurt at home. When I'm in a pinch and in a bind for time and we don't have fresh goat milk, like during the winter, I use ultra pasteurized organic cow milk. And I just pour it right in the jar with the culture and incubate it. So it's definitely fine to use for that. This is a picture of some coconut milk yogurt. So coconut milk, let's just talk about it, because it is my favorite for making a plant milk version. When you buy coconut milk, because it's popular now also, you're going to be faced with many choices from premium coconut cream to light coconut milk. What you have to remember is it's the same thing, but more or less diluted by water, or more concentrated. So when they drain the liquid out of the coconut, they then mash up, basically, cook, mash up, heat, squeeze and press the juices out of that coconut meat. That is then either dehydrated more to make coconut cream or diluted more to make a lighter version. So if you want it thick, you got to use some coconut cream in there. Don't try to go all light. If you want it thick without it adding other thickeners. There's a chart in the book on how to use all the different thickeners you can, from pectin to agar to also gelatin. So lots of different options, but they all have different requirements. So just know that about coconut milk. But when you make coconut cream yogurt, it's pretty darn delicious. So let's talk now about equipment. You don't need much to make yogurt. Like I said, if you have ultra pasteurized milk, you don't even need to heat treat it. But if you do want to use regular milk or raw milk, and I'll tell you about making raw milk yogurt, then you're going to have to heat treat it. So the simplest way to do that is to put it on the stovetop. You can bring it either to a boil, like I do, and turn it off, or you can use your thermometer and you can bring it to at least 180 and hold it there for 10 minutes. So that's going to require some stirring because you don't want it to stick. The Instant Pot, most of them, the bigger ones, have a setting during the yogurt cycle to boil the milk. Now I've had this be kind of all over the place on how hot the milk actually gets. I put a remote thermometer in there during my testing to see what temperature it actually gets to, and it doesn't always heat treat it as sufficiently as the stovetop does. But if you're doing a lot of milk and you want to not worry about stirring it, you use the pressure setting, where it's not venting, and then it's not going to stick and make it such a big mess. You cannot just release this vent though when you're done, or it will boil over. So you have to let it cool a bit in here. For that reason, this is often faster. Instant Pot is not instant for everything. There's always a catch. Now let's talk about the thermometer. I'm a fan of these little dial thermometers, but you got to calibrate them. So I've got some ice water here. You're going to leave it in there for a few minutes and make sure it gets down to 32 or 33. If it does not, you have two choices. You can mentally make that adjustment, but even better is to take a little wrench and adjust the nut on the back. So if you're going to be precise about your temperature readings, you've got to know that your thermometer is working well. So this one is good. Now I'm going to do a little trick that lots of cheesemakers know, to put a little water in your pot first. And that kind of is amazing, but it actually does bind a little bit with the porosity of the pot to where your milk isn't going to scorch as easily. So that's yogurt. I don't want to pour that in there. So this is milk I milked this morning from our goats. Just going to pour it right in there. And get this guy going. I don't have to stir it too much if I did that ice water. So while this is heating, I want to show you these other yogurts and the different thicknesses. This is the store-bought cow. And we're going to drain this in a minute, but I want you to see that it's pretty darn thick, but has a gentle, delicate texture. Now, all of these yogurts, unless there are certain microbes in there that create extra viscosity from something called exopolysaccharides, they're going to lose a lot of whey. So when you open your jar of homemade yogurt, don't stir it. That's just going to make that whey want to come off faster. Just take off thin layers from the top. It's quite delicate. This goat milk yogurt that I did boil, so I did a 180 heat treatment on this milk, and this one I boiled. So we've got a pretty good thickness with a cream top. Believe it or not, goat milk does separate a little bit, and if you have extra creamy goat milk, you're going to get cream on top of your yogurt. This milk, the cow milk, was homogenized, so you will not get cream on top of your yogurt. So this is a great texture for goat milk. Different times of year, it's going to be more or less thick. This guy stir. This is the sour cream. So I bought organic heavy cream, heated it just to the incubation temperature, and added yogurt culture. Yogurt sour cream. You can make any of these products, sour cream, creme fraiche, all of them with yogurt culture. Yeah, you just need to adjust your incubation temperature to make those yogurt microbes happy. So for the sour cream, oh, and there's so much cream on top I can't even get through the top. So this is a fairly thick, which you can see, but still pretty creamy. So I have some things I could do with this. I could whip it. There's a picture of that later, and make like a whipped cream, sour cream whipped cream, yogurt whipped cream. Or I could let it come to room temperature and churn it into butter, yogurt butter. It's really good, and it's probiotic. I'll stir this guy. Now let's get our other yogurt draining. So equipment for draining, you need a pot to set the yogurt in. Got there. And you need a cloth to drain it. You can use a real cheesecloth. I get these from getculture.com. They're wonderful cheesecloths, 120 threads per square inch. Or you can buy some flour sack towels, flour sack cloths from the grocery store. They also work very well. Now, if you're going to use these, you should sanitize them first with boiling water. All of these fabrics, which I did this morning with this one. Just lay it over your colander and pour your yogurt in. A wide mouth jar is easier. Now that's the yogurt after it's been chilled. When you're just finishing your yogurt, when it's finished its incubation time, it's going to be warm, of course. When it's warm, it's not going to be very thick. So don't let that make you feel discouraged if you open it up and it's quite thin. Let's compare this one here. So this is it right after incubation. So quite soupy thin. Chilling will let it thicken. It just reduces the viscosity of the whole thing. So let's pour that in there too. You can drain your yogurt before chilling or after chilling. Either one is just fine. You know, so again, if most of us are busy, even when we're at the stay-at-home stage like we are during this broadcast and recording, oh, there goes the milk. Good thing I was watching that. milk boils pretty dramatically. So if you're busy, let your yogurt making adapt to that. Otherwise, you're liable to not do it. So once I have this in the cloth, and plug that guy, I'm just going to put a lid over the whole thing. I'll drape these up in case there's any wicking of moisture over, and set this somewhere so that a cat can't sit on top of it or something like that. I'm going to stir it once in a while during the draining, maybe once every hour if I think about it. And then how long do you drain it? However long you want. So when it gets to the texture you like, again, remembering that it's going to thicken more as it chills, then you can take it out of that, put it in another container, a bowl, whatever, stir it up some because it's going to have some lumps in it, and chill it. Now, let's finish off this other yogurt, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the advantages of drained yogurt. So, this is hot now. If you put your yogurt cultures in here, you would kill them. This is even too hot for them. So you're going to want to chill it. So for that, I use a sink of cool water or a pan in this case. It's going to chill very quickly. I usually chill it only to about 125, then add the culture and then get it into incubate. And it's going to cool down a little bit more during that time. You don't want to go any lower than 110 usually, or you may have to warm it back up. You can use your thermometer for this, or if you do a lot of dishes, you can stick your finger in it, and if it's almost too hot to touch, but you can still touch it, it's probably pretty good. In the beginning of any of these processes, it's always a good idea though to verify with your thermometer as you learn. So for today's for incubation, we'll let that cool for a minute. We're going to use the Instant Pot. Instant Pot attempts to keep it at about 110. So you put water in there without the rack. This can set directly in there. And I'm just going to set the jar in, set the lid on top. It doesn't have to latch in order for this to work. And I set mine to 8 hours. If I'm doing it in an ice chest, which I often do, this is a little one that I've drilled a hole in the front. And I stick one of these guys, one of the probe thermometers through there, so I can read the interior temperature. I'm going to put a towel in it if I use it, and a jar of hot water. And it will usually keep the temperature just great for 8 hours. All the other incubators you can buy are going to do basically the same thing. A yogurt maker doesn't do the whole thing for you. It won't cool the milk. I think there's a really expensive one that will cool it for you, but most of us are not going to have access to that. There's a reason these were some of the first foods, because they really don't need a lot of equipment. All right, let's check our temperature. And I'm going to use the finger check too. Oh, and it's perfect. Yep, just under 120. So that happens quickly. Now we have the choice of adding yogurt culture in a powdered form. And for this quart of milk, I would only add a little tiny pinch. The amount you add is somewhat arbitrary. You can put a lot in there and it'll work, and you can put a little in there and it'll work. Of course, if you're wanting your yogurt culture to last and you don't want to buy more right away, a little is your better choice. Now for today's, I'm going to use this remaining yogurt here as our culture. So I'm just going to pour this right into the same jar. You can reuse the same yogurt as a starter for several batches. You may even be able to get away with months of using the same yogurt as your starter. Those microbes, depending on how often you make your yogurt, are going to change. So just monitor it, and it won't be a dangerous thing, but if the flavor starts changing towards too tart or not tart enough, you might need to refresh your yogurt starter at that time. There are heirloom cultures, and I talk about those in the book, that will last forever if they're made really frequently. Yogurt likes to be reused. So there's a little yogurt maker. I said it. Incubator that I used for quite some time, but then the heating element quit. So, now I've got another piece of plastic that doesn't work. So let's get this going into here now. I already have my warm water in there. I'm just going to set the jar in. Now the water bath around the yogurt doesn't need to come all the way to the top. It will still maintain the temperature pretty well, but you can put it up higher. Isn't that making the happy sound? Now I will get it set, and I'm going to set it to 9 hours. Fern, my husband, likes his yogurt a little tartar, so we're going to let it incubate a little longer. This is what I want you to kind of get the idea of, is that you can play with this and make it the way your family likes it, just with messing around for time. So let's talk about the benefits of draining yogurt. So you get a couple of good things from this. First, any residual lactose, most of the residual lactose is going to be drained out with the whey. So that is going to mean it's more digestible, even for people who are lactose intolerant. It's going to not continue to acidify in the fridge. In other words, it's going to last longer. And it's going to have this nice thick creaminess without anything added to make it thick. If you decide you want to use thickeners, so that chart may be difficult for you guys to read. It is in the book, but there are many options. So thickeners, flavors, there are many options for expanding on your yogurt experience. When adding flavors, if it's a liquid or fairly thin, you can add it to the milk right before you put it into the incubator. Or you can always add any flavoring afterward, especially if you're going to do a drained yogurt. If you're going to do one that's not going to be drained or otherwise thickened, stirring it in will do, as I mentioned earlier, and cause some of that whey to be released. If you want to add your fruits and things to the cultured milk, they are going to settle to the bottom. But if you do that with the thought of making a fruit at the bottom yogurt, no problem. Good idea to do it in little jars then. You can also use your yogurt to make so many things. Now, of course, you can add it to dishes that are hot, gravies and soups and things like that. But you will kill those probiotics, which is fine. Still use it. But if you want to keep those probiotics intact, the recipes in my book are focused on that. There are some wonderful salad dressings, soups. This one is gazpacho blanco, which has always been one of my favorite Spanish tapas. This is my own recipe using yogurt in place of the bread to give it that creamy texture. And you can make it into that whipped creme fraiche that I showed you earlier, and butter, all those things. So just know that there's a whole world that you can use yogurt for in desserts and treats and all of that. Cocktails too are in the book. So thank you again for joining me here at the farm, and I hope that you will maybe one day come to a class here at the farm when we can all gather again, or that I'll get to meet you at another live event.